We have so many gray areas in our life. We have gray areas with our habits, in our relationships, in our career, even with our spiritual life, our health, right? Every place that is important to us, we have gray areas. What are gray areas? As you're probably wondering, what does she mean by that? Those are the areas that we know deep down that there's something that's there that we probably should be paying more attention to, something that is obscure from our normal vision. But if we look really hard, we know it's there, and we're choosing to ignore it. We're choosing not to deal with it because it requires so much effort and it requires us to get honest with ourselves. And it's so much easier to pretend it's not there than it is to dive in and deal with it head on.
You're listening to Give Yourself Some Leeway with me, your host, Eugene Lee. I've spent the last 4 years trying to discover how to break the burnout cycle. And as a high achiever in a fast-paced world, I know how easy it is to slip back into old habits, leaving you feeling overwhelmed and left behind. If you're anything like me, then you need to hear this. Burning out is not your fault. Yes, you can recover from burnout. And the post-burnout growth is not only real, but it feels amazing. This podcast is dedicated to helping break the stigma around mental health in the workplace, ending burnout culture for good, and the action steps that you can take today towards your personal growth and success. So let's do it. Gray area drinking. I feel that's a category that a lot of us either experience ourselves or we know someone close to us who blurs the boundaries between a social drink and being physically dependent on alcohol. But when it comes to gray areas, it's not only alcohol. It can happen in any area of our life where we blur the boundaries between what's serving us and what no longer serves us. Yet we hold on to it because it feels comfortable. Today I'm joined by Kari Schwear, and she talks about how you can identify gray areas in your life, things that are no longer serving you, and the steps that you can take to set the boundaries in place so that you can take back control. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode as we get one step closer to ending burnout culture for good. Kari, welcome to Give Yourself Some Leeway. I just wanted to say that I was really looking forward to this interview for so long, so thank you for making the time today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to you as well, Eugene. Thank you.
Kari, your background around gray area, it covers a lot of where people cross boundaries and they don't even realize that they are crossing boundaries, and they just don't have a lack of awareness around this topic. So what brought you to gray area thinking?
Yes. Oh my gosh, such a great question. And thank you. Yes, it is such a big topic. We have so many gray areas in our life. We have gray areas with our habits, in our relationships, in our career, even with our spiritual life, our health, right? Every place that is important to us, we have gray areas. What are gray areas? As you're probably wondering, what does she mean by that? Those are the areas that we know deep down that there's something that's there that we probably should be paying more attention to, something that is obscure from our normal vision. But if we look really hard, we know it's there, and we're choosing to ignore it. We're choosing not to deal with it because it requires so much effort and it requires us to get honest with ourselves. And it's so much easier to pretend it's not there than it is to dive in and deal with it head on, whether that's with relationships. Maybe you're married or you're with a significant other and you're roommates. You're not even really like friends. You're just like, oh, hey, how's it going? Is that how you want to treat your spouse or your significant other? Maybe it's in your habits, like drinking, and we'll get more into that. It could be in a number of things, even with our health. We know we probably should lose some weight and work out more, but yet we're choosing not to because it's just easier to have an extra donut instead of thinking about going to the gym, right? It's all things that we do. It's behavioral based. for the
Yeah,
most
the
part.
three areas I always think of, it's always health, wealth, and relationships. And these are the three
Absolutely.
areas that people tend to turn a blind eye to. It's like if it's your
Yes.
health, it's like, oh yeah, really should. And I see my friends going to the gym, but I really don't have the time for that. It's a bit out of my comfort zone. Or in your relationships, there's a lot of red flags coming up, and you're like, yeah, but I'm kind of comfortable with the way things are now. I'm kind of just getting used to it. And the same with wealth or finances. And you're like, oh, I've really been in a tight spot, or I always resort to retail therapy, and but that's the way things have always been. And I found my
Yes.
ways around it. And it's kind of
Yes.
like blurring the boundaries about what's helping you and what's no longer serving you, and kind of
Exactly.
going with the flow of what's comfortable.
Exactly. And that's just it. It's comfortable. It's so comfortable, whether it's working for you or not. It's comfortable to stay in that place. And, because like I said, it's easier than actually doing something about it for sure. I like that. You gave some good examples there, Eugene.
Yeah, again, that's just speaking from my own experience, because a lot of the time you have people who have coping mechanisms or self-sabotaging behaviors. And
Yep.
when you point it out to them and you're like, this does not serve you in any way, it's actually holding you back. And they're like, oh, but I've been doing this since I was a kid and it's all
Yes.
I've ever known. So if I change that, that's going to change part of my identity.
Oh,
And they
you
just
just
hold onto it.
yes, I'm like, yes, 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 snap, snap, snaps for that one. You just nailed it. It is all about the identity. You just hit the nail on the head, which is what we were going to rise up to, but you got right to it. Truly, what we do, our behaviors are stemming from what we believe about ourselves. And so, whether it is, whether you think or believe that you deserve to have something, a lot of times that's why we self sabotage because we know we're meant for more. Of course, we're meant for more. But for whatever reason, you've always done it this way. You've always done that. Your parents did it. Your friends have always done it. Why not you? Right. So we say these things to ourselves out loud. I've always been this way. I've always done that. That's how we've always done it. And that becomes your guiding north. That becomes your identity. And when that happens, your behaviors, self-sabotaging or not, are going to follow. So when you look at your life, if you really take a step back, go up, look at your entire life and really see how you've been performing, how you've been just going about your own being, like how you're showing up for yourself and others, and ask yourself, am I performing and being the best that I know I can be? Or am I holding myself back because I know it's maybe not for me? And if you are in that place of you're not sure and your identity's getting rocked a little bit, and you're not sure if you're able to step into this new version of yourself that you know you want to be, then that's where the work needs to happen. And that's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to look under the hood. Nobody wants to see the grease and the oil and the misfiring cylinders. They just don't want to see that. They want to see a purring engine, right?
And that's what I love, is when people get into the nitty gritty of it. A lot of people
Hmm.
just, they scratch the surface level because they don't want to get people uncomfortable. What was that like for you to get this awareness around gray areas? Because I think often we
Yes.
just scratch the surface and we're like, I know there's an issue there, or I know I have a problem with that, but oh, I know if I go down that rabbit hole, it's going to bring up a lot of things, and that's going to be seriously uncomfortable. So I'm just going to stay up here at surface level and be kind of aware of it, but do nothing about it.
Yes. Well, I'll share my own experience. Back in 2014, I started questioning my relationship with alcohol. I was in a great area career, didn't really like what I was doing. I'd show up, I'd get paid decent. I did a great job. I liked what I did, but I didn't really love it. It didn't really fulfill me. And I was just kind of going through life, willy-nilly it, not really caring. And I knew that I wanted something different, but I didn't know what that was. So alcohol was a great way because it worked for me to, get caught up to avoid getting caught up in myself. So when I got home, I'd pour a drink just so I could relax, forget about my day, forget about my problems, forget about how I'm really feeling. And then that then became an issue because now I was using alcohol as a self-sabotaging coping mechanism for myself. And then after a couple years of doing that, several years actually of drinking, my husband started making comments to me like, honey, I think you're drinking too much. At this point now, our marriage is sort of a little bit on the rocks, if you will. We weren't necessarily super in love. We were roommates at best. We were very polite to each other. I made dinner and we did all the things, but there wasn't a relationship anymore. So now I found myself in a gray area career with a gray area marriage, which of course led to my gray area drinking. So gray area drinking, just to give some context to the definition, is in between somebody who is socially drinking and physically dependent on alcohol or severely abusing alcohol. So this is wide spectrum of drinkers. And if we look at the gray area of drinking, we can look at areas in our life that also are very applicable to that. Where are you in these medium or darker shades of gray where you really need to take a light out and shine some light on it so you can start to make some changes? And for me, it was those three areas: my career, my marriage, and my drinking. And once I started working on one, which was my drinking first, which I believe is always the first place you start with the habit that you can correct, because then everything else becomes easier. It becomes more clear. You can't be clear-minded and make good decisions if you're intoxicated, right? So we start with the drinking. And then from that point, I worked on my marriage. And then lo and behold, my career happened, which is what I do today, which is coach. So it all sort of came full circle for me, and what a blessing. And I'm so, so grateful for that, for sure.
And it's funny how that comes about. I think a lot of people, they've hit a rock bottom of sorts, and that's when it comes into their awareness. And when they start doing something about it, I've noticed this pattern a lot in the podcast, especially with coaches. They've hit a rock bottom, and then they're like, okay, now I'm going to do something about it. They go on this recovery journey. And at some part in the journey, they're like, now I want to share how far I've come with others so that maybe someone else who's experiencing this right now can be guided in the right direction. So they don't need to feel that pain anymore.
Yes.
Or I can stop someone from ever feeling that pain, or stop someone from going down that rabbit hole that I went down, or hitting that rock bottom moment. If I can catch them early and stop them from getting to that level. And I feel that's part of the recovery journey, is being of service to others so that they never have to feel that way.
Absolutely. But I will say this: I think everybody needs to go through their own journey of turbulence. I think it's necessary. I think when we even think about Michelangelo, right? When he sculpted the David or the La Pieta, for example, when he was carving those sculptures, all the work that he did, but especially the sculptures, he had to chip away by using a chisel on the marble that he used. He was chipping away everything that wasn't the David or the La Pieta, which if you're unfamiliar with that sculpture, it is the Virgin Mary holding Jesus after he died. So it's a really a remarkable piece of art. And so when he was sculpting that, that's what he was doing. What didn't represent that? What needed to be chipped away? And I firmly believe as humans that we get to be chiseled. We get to be chiseled away so that we can be the better version of ourselves. And in order for us to do that, we are allowed to go through some hard times. And if we don't go through those hard times, we'll never learn resilience. We'll never be able to build up our self-esteem. It's like when we even think about a bird, an eagle. Let's take an eagle, for example. When the babies are being born out of their shells, it is a long process for that to happen. But you should never help an eagle bird, a little baby eagle bird, come out of its shell, because then you're robbing it of that experience of gaining all this resilience it's going to need throughout its life. We strip that away. So instead of coddling someone with their situation, this is why with addicts, they talk about don't enable, because you're helping them. Stop helping them, right? You want to be able to build resilience. And the way that we build resilience is we must be able to go through some of the things we have to go through. I want to retract a little bit what I said. You always want to support somebody who needs it, but without enabling them. I just wanted to correct myself on that because it's important. But nevertheless, we need to be chipped away. Don't be afraid to get chipped away with a chisel. That's all.
I think it's a matter of not, let's say, enabling people, but also, as you said, having the supports in place for them because I've had people who have from my point of view, hit rock bottom.
Mhm.
But to them, it wasn't far down enough for them. It wasn't
Boom.
far
Yep.
enough for them to
Yes.
make any change. And
Yes.
for anyone else looking in, it was like, oh, wow, that must be a rock bottom moment for them. It must be time for change. And they just keep on going and keep on sabotaging and not only hurting them, but everyone around them. And anyone who tried to offer them help, they were like, no, this is the way things have always been. Stop trying to change me.
Yep.
And it just becomes this
Cycle.
downward
Hmm.
spiral. It's
Hmm.
just this self-sabotage cycle that you have to almost, you can, let's say, reach out a hand to them and say,
Yes.
look, I'm here for support when you're ready.
Yep.
But at the same time, a lot of them just don't want to accept that help. There's the
That's right.
taboo around reaching out for help makes you look weak. And that was
Hmm.
something that was conditioned into some people from a young age. And then they just keep on going on this downward spiral. And that's heartbreaking as well for their families.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so when we're talking about someone reaching out for help for the first time, that's a different story. But I have an acquaintance in my life that, when he ended up relapsing from alcohol, it was bad. It was very, very bad. And I've never seen anything like it. I because I don't coach people who are severely abusing alcohol, so this was foreign to me in a way. And when I saw how terrible alcohol had destroyed this man, losing massive amounts of weight in just, 2 weeks time, almost died, almost lost everything, checked himself into rehab through, people encouraging, and then checking out just a couple days later, and then falling back in the same trap just a couple months after that, and has done that yet again. So it's at what point does it take for that person to finally get to their place of enough? And I think that's it for any gray area that we have. We need to find our own place of enough. We have to be willing to say, this is it. I can't take it anymore. I need to start making some changes. And that looks different for every single person, right? Whether it's somebody who is, in a marriage, like I said, that's not working out, and they're they've tried and they don't know what else to do, stay in it until you feel like you've had enough. And at that point, then make some good choices. But we quickly react instead of respond. And if we react, we do it with judgment. We do it too quickly. We often make mistakes. We make poor decisions in those moments. Versus when we respond, we do it with curiosity. We want to know more about the situation. We're going to search for answers. We're going to be in a preparation stage of like, what does action look like after this? What do I need to do to make those changes? And that's where you need to be in order to be successful of moving out of a gray area in your life.
Yeah, I think it's, again, as you said, having the intelligence to respond rather than reacting on emotions. I think one of my coaches always says that when emotions are high and intelligence is low. So it's when you have that spike of emotions, you're reacting on emotion, and sometimes when you're in this gray area, your emotional state is not very stable anyway. So you're not able to make clear decisions, clear life decisions. Also, um, so when it comes to, let's say, these gray areas and these coping mechanisms, how do you, well, recognize that you're in this gray area? How does that come into your awareness? Is it something that you need to realize yourself, or can someone else bring it to your attention?
I think the last part of your question is yes, I do believe it could be someone else, but I also believe it already comes from you. So we all have a built-in guiding system. We all have this innate system inside of us. We can call it whatever you want. Your gut, your inner spirit, the Holy Spirit, your guidance, your North Star, whatever that is for you. We all have something inside of us, whether that's a gut feeling or a feeling somewhere inside where something's not quite right. And listen to that voice. You already know. Sometimes when we say, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, you already know. Sometimes it's just getting quiet and listening. And so if you're already having some of those internal deep stirrings, as I call them, the little poke in the bear kind of moments, pay attention to them because they're there to tell you something. And so if you're, for me, it was like those internal questions. Am I drinking too much? How much is too much? Why is my marriage not thriving like I really want it to be? Why am I stuck in this career? Am I not good enough for anything else? What can I do? My gosh, I'm getting so old, right? And I was like 40. I'm getting so old. I don't know what to do with my life. Oh my goodness. All those types of questions, those are the questions that you want to harness. And half the time they come into our mind, Eugene, and we're like, we're blowing them off. We're like, I'll get to that, oh, it's not that bad, or, oh, oh, it's not that bad. That's the biggest one, right? It's not that bad. And that is part of the definition of the gray area where things appear like they're okay. They're not so bad. So you're on this balance beam. And so when things are bad, they're really bad. But when they're good, they're really good. So you're just ebbing and flowing between these two states instead of fixing or addressing the problem firsthand. And now that's no longer a problem. And now you're elevated. Not only are you elevated, but now you can step into this new identity that you want to be instead of saying, but I've always been this way. But I've always been this way. Right? Because that's a really hard place to come from. So with me, what I do with my clients is I really work on what's your identity now? Let's talk about what you believe about yourself right now, right? Who is it who you wish to be? Okay, we obviously have a gap then. How are we going to get there? And how we get there is the process I take my clients through, which is really deciding, and decide is an acronym, how we do that. And it's a step-by-step process. And a lot of it is surrounded around what they believe about themselves, because that's where the behavioral change needs to happen. Yeah.
A lot of these coping mechanisms as well, even beyond alcohol and the gray area and drinking, from my own experience before I burnt out, especially being a high achiever and absolute workaholic, uh, it's when I started my in my last job, it was my career for about 10 years. I started from a place of high enthusiasm, and I always had high energy. I was a student coming into my first full-time job, and I was high energy, always getting work done, 12-hour shifts, no problem. But as time went on, that high level of energy started to wane, and I
Yeah.
had to compensate for that. Um, that slowly that the ebb slow the slow fading of the energy with caffeine. And so it
Mm.
started off with, okay, I'll have a can of Red Bull to get me through the day. And next thing it turned into, and it's hindsight is 2020, but when I look back at it, it got to a point where the back seat of my car had like 3 cases of Monster Energy cans. So I had about like 40 cans in the back seat. And people were like,
Oh
oh,
my
wow, it's like
gosh.
you've got so much. And I was like, I'll just stock up because it's cheaper if I buy in bulk. And it might be 2 or 3 cans a day. And next thing, it got so bad to a point where I was just drinking them out of habit. It was no longer, oh, I need it for the energy. It's, oh no, I just drink it as if I was drinking a glass of water to get me through the day. And
Yes.
when I realized this, I was like, hang on a second, am I actually drinking this for the energy? But because
Yes.
I was so desensitized to caffeine, it had no effect. And next thing I said, what if and this was just to trick my own brain to reduce the caffeine, was when I finish one can, or if I'm halfway through the can, I'd fill the rest of it up with water and drink it
Mm.
diluted. And I get to a point where I was drinking the can and it was only water in the can. And I was like, the habit was just drinking out of the can. It was no longer to do with the actual energy drink. But the habit that I had developed was caffeine equals energy equals getting me through my day. And it was a matter of trying to break that equation. But that was just something that it was part of a lot of coping mechanisms that I had, where my end goal was, I need to be seen as a highly energetic, highly productive worker to get me through the day. Otherwise, my identity as the high energy, high productive, high achiever is invalidated if
Mm.
I'm not seen as being high energy all the time.
Mm.
So that was, let's say, the belief behind the coping
Yes.
mechanism behind that
That's
gray
right.
area, where I was like, yes, it's not healthy to have this much caffeine in my day, but if I don't show up to work with this level of energy, it's going to invalidate how I see myself in the workplace.
Yes. Sounds like fear was driving some of that too, fear of being seen for who you
Yes.
really were. So a lot of that, the gray area, a commonality is really about having a mask on. You're living two different lives, if you will, two different personalities. At home, you're one way, in front of others, you're another. That people pleasing disguise of, trying to be it all to everyone. And that is so exhausting, and that's what keeps people stuck in some sort of habit loop, is because, again, it goes back to identity, but it goes back to the belief. So why do you believe what you do about yourself? Is this a belief system that you have? I'm not going to be good enough, or I won't be valued unless I come to work high energy like you were believing, right? Unless I am on top doing performance at a 10 level, I won't be worthy. So a lot of it comes back to the worthiness and the not enoughness. Like we all have that, right? We've all suffered some form of not enoughness in our life. And I believe that's true for every single human, right?
Yeah, and I think that's again, it's the fear of being seen for that
Mm.
enoughness or not
Yeah.
enoughness. The fear of someone pointing out, "Hey, you're incompetent at what you're doing," or "Hey, you're fake," or
Mhm.
I know you're faking it till you make it." That you're being inauthentic. You're not being your true self, and all of these things that people are afraid of will be thrown at them,
Mhm.
but at the same time, they don't want to be vulnerable about what they're going through, that they'd rather put up that mask and not get called out or play it
Mhm.
safe or stay quiet
Mhm.
and not put themselves in a place where someone might call them out and stay in that gray area
Yeah.
where they're, for me, it was living on autopilot for a while. It was like, yes, this is comfortable. And
Mhm.
yes, I can go through the motions without much thought, and the day flies by, and that's okay. It's comfort zone, but it wasn't fulfilling. The energy that I was putting into it was not being reciprocated, and some things were no longer aligned 10 years into the career, that I was like, I know I'm meant for more, and I know I could be
Yes.
doing more in this career, or towards progressing in this career, or helping in different areas, but the opportunity was no longer there. So it was my decision then. I was like, now that I'm aware of it, it's going to be niggling at me. And
Yes.
and and if I stay put, then I am no longer going to be showing up at my best in
Mhm.
this career, or in this role where I know I can do better to help others. And then that's when decisions start getting tough. It's like, okay, am I serving them at my best? Am I serving myself at my best? Can I do better for them? Can I do better for myself? If I'm not showing up with my with a clear head, am I showing up the best at my job? And
Yes.
then and then it's becoming aware of, okay, what am I using as coping mechanisms, or what am I using to um, get me through the day when I'm trying to, let's say, block out something else, if that makes sense. It's
Mhm.
it's it's something like, I know I'm no longer aligned, but what am I doing to get me through the day, to fulfill me in some way? Maybe something that's an outlet or a coping
Mhm.
mechanism, or maybe I'm self-sabotaging myself in some way to be like, no, you stay in your comfort zone. You're full of notions here. It'll pass with time.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, you said a very key word, which was awareness. We have to have awareness. And awareness, again, that goes back to that inner guiding system that we have built inside of us. You already, it's being jolted. But if we have awareness and we're ignoring it, then that's one thing. But when we have awareness and we pair it with intentionality, now we can do something, right? When we have action, when we have intentions, when we have the awareness, now we have somewhere the awareness to go. And that means we can make some progress. So we can't just ignore it, because ignoring it's never going to work ever. It's always going to be there, right? We have to address the situation. We have to address the monkey that's in the room. And the sooner you do it, the faster you're going to move through it. And I promise you this, there'll be another gray area waiting for you, right? Because we always have a gray area somewhere in our life. Whether that's with health and our body and how we feel and our mind and our spiritual walk and just what, like I said, career, your habits, there's always something that we can be working on to strive to be a little bit better. And that's the goal, Eugene. It's 1% better every day. What can we do? What are intentions that we can be doing every day to get us to where we want to go?
Yes, I love that. It always comes back to the 1%. That's everything that I've always. It's the marginal gains. Over time,
Yes.
it's like
It
what's the
adds
one
up.
one thing I can do? Exactly, it all adds up. It's like one step in the right direction is the thing.
Yes.
It's trying to find
Yes.
what's the one step in the right direction. And
Yes.
for me, with give yourself some leeway, it's always about taking a step back and what's the smallest step that I can take today that
Yes.
if I was not to do it, it would seem almost more difficult not to do it today. Something
Yes.
that's almost so ridiculously simple that
Yes.
if I didn't do it, it would feel like, oh, that was a waste of time that I didn't take the time to do that today. For example, two of my most simple steps that I always recommend to people, and they're like, oh, I could do that any day. That's so simple. I could do that any day. Why are you recommending? Because they don't do it. And the first one is to start your day with a glass of water. You're hydrating your brain. You have a clear mind. If you don't hydrate your brain, you're not going to have clear decisions. So if you start off your day and that's your one win is to have that glass of water, then every other decision you're going to make today is going to be one glass of water clearer. And they're like, oh, that's so simple. I'm like, okay, great. Try it out for a week. See how you get on. See if you miss any days. And
I'm lighting up over here because that is one of the first things I ask my clients to do when they work with me is I want to hear about their day-to-day schedule. And I said, tell me what the first thing is you do in the morning. And I often get, oh, I go start my coffee, I turn on the news, I'm scrolling through my emails, and I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. We're not doing any of that. We're going to start with a full glass of water for the same reasons. We need our sleep to repair ourselves, and that's when our body eliminates our toxins and it cleans itself. So like you said, when you drink a full glass of water in the morning, you're nourishing your body, you're nourishing your brain, you're giving yourself energy, and you're rehydrating, which is so important. And then I go on to tell them, I really want them to avoid their phone and all electronics for the first 30 minutes. That is a time for them to pour into themselves, whether that's with movement, exercise, journaling, reflecting, praying, meditation, whatever. That's such a great time to fill your own cup before you give your power away to anybody else on the other side of a screen. Please start doing that for yourself. If that's one thing you take away from this interview today, as that I hope that rings true for a lot of people, that they'll do it, that
Yeah,
they'll really
100%.
do it.
It's and it's those simple things. You just tell people to focus
Yes.
on themselves. It's like straight away
Yes.
their energy goes straight on to, oh, what if someone emailed me during the night? It's like they can
Who
wait an hour.
cares?
They can wait. You sleep in an extra hour, and they won't know the difference. But you get up and you
Yes.
spend that hour for yourself. The second thing I always tell them is that when they go to the bathroom or whenever the first time they look in the mirror, to smile at their reflection
Mhm.
because they
Yeah.
start off their day with one smile. And if one person, the only person that looks back at you and smiles that day is your reflection, you started off that day with one smile. That's a win for
Yeah.
you. Any additional smiles that you give to other people and that they give back to you is a bonus.
Yes.
So you start off with one smile and it's just to yourself. And then at least you wake up and say, okay, positive psychology, someone will smile at me today.
Yeah.
And there's like, okay, is there like, what if I try smiling at someone else? And it might be a bit uncomfortable at first because you're not used to it, because
Mhm.
you haven't been smiling every day. You haven't been smiling at your coworkers. What if you started smiling more when you were with your partner, with your family, with your friends, with your colleagues? How will that brighten up your day? And it all starts with that one smile in the bathroom mirror.
Yes, it reminds me of Mel Robbins' book, High Five, like high five yourself first thing in the morning. And I think there's something about that. And I do believe with positive psychology to look at yourself, not only just smile in the mirror, which is I love that, by the way, Eugene, but also to say, I love you. I'm proud of you. You're amazing, right? When we can really say those things in the mirror to ourselves, oh my gosh, it's not just, your brain at first might go, this is BS. I don't really believe this, But I promise you, the more often you start doing that and you tell yourself good, nourishing things about yourself to yourself, oh my goodness, I'm telling you, you'll start to believe it. And like, okay, this is a little embarrassing to admit this, but I'm going to share it with you because I don't mind being vulnerable. The other day, I was getting ready. We were going out for dinner. My friends were here from out of town. My husband was in the other room. He took a shower before me, so he was dressed and ready. And I got done doing my hair, and my makeup, and I had a really cute outfit on. And I looked at myself and I went, I'll tell you what, for 57 years old, I look pretty darn good, right? So my husband comes in behind me and I go, babe, and I'm doing like this with my hair. And I go, how did you get so lucky getting this for a wife? And he goes, I don't know, babe. And he gives me a hug and a kiss. And, we were laughing about it. But even though that sounds like, if somebody doesn't really love who they are, that might feel kind of weird. But when you can get to that place, when you can really look at yourself in the mirror and be so happy for the person that you are, and you can truly love yourself, that is when life becomes so abundant and you're so grateful, right? And that's my goal for everyone to get to that place, is to just feel so much abundance and gratitude and joy, even your own reflection in the mirror, to be so happy with who you are as a human being. Not necessarily about maybe your looks being a perfect way or anything, but that night I felt pretty good. And we have our moments, right? When we look in the mirror and we're like, yeah, not bad. But instead of saying not bad, why not like, wow, yeah, that's pretty good, right? I think there's a shift of energy that happens when we can do that.
Yeah, it's not coming from a place of vanity or in.
Yes.
I know some people and they're always doing it, but they're doing it because it's coming from a place of insecurity, and
Yes.
they're like, okay, I have to maintain this image, maintain this image that I'm absolutely in love with myself, so that
Mm,
other people will think so too, that I am the definition of awesomeness. And
yes. Yeah.
rather than coming from a place where you're coming from self-kindness and self-compassion, where you're like, wow, you look pretty good for your age. Wow,
Mm,
you're actually pretty healthy. Okay. You've been making a lot of healthy decisions lately, and it's showing. You've been
yeah.
putting in the hard work, and it's showing. And it's about treating yourself and talking to yourself like you would your best friend.
Yes.
If
And you
you're
know
if,
what?
yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Um, I'll go. So I think it has a lot to do with when we feel really good, healthy, and it shows on the outside then. And I had somebody, I think it was last year, that I hadn't seen her in about 6 years. So it had been a while. And she said to me, how do you keep looking better and better the older you get? I don't get it, Kari. Like, what is your secret? And I'm like, I wish I could tell you it's this magical secret. But the secret really is that I feel so healthy and good, and I'm at peace with myself. I'm in a great place. Am I exactly where I want to be? No. And thank goodness, because I still want to be able to grow, right? I think we always have room to improve and grow. But that was the differentiator over the last several years. Is I don't drink, I don't eat junk food, I exercise regularly, I pour into myself every day. It's all those little things added up, which are reflected not only in my hopefully in my myself as a human being, as a woman who serves others, but also the looks, right? I still want to look good. Of course I do. So I think that's part of the whole package. Is when you feel really good, it radiates outwardly. And that's what everybody should be striving for, is for them to feel internal peace and joy and gratitude inside, and everything else will take care of itself.
And I think another part of that is also when someone compliments us, that we feel comfortable accepting that compliment from them. Be like, oh,
Yes.
thank you so much. Because
You.
oftentimes people they go on the defensive and they're like, oh no, and they start talking
I
themselves talking
know.
down, and it's
Yeah.
just like, oh, you look really good, and it's like, oh, it's just my makeup. Oh no, it's it's like, are you wearing your glasses? And they self-deprecate as
Yes.
a way of defending themselves, or
Yes.
to
Why?
so that the compliment comes across as a humorous, rather than
Y-
accepting the compliment, being like, oh, thank you, I really appreciate
Yeah.
that compliment, and kind of reciprocating it back as thank you for supporting me, rather
Yes.
than throwing it back as humor, that how why would you compliment me?
Yes, I love that. It's so true. And truth be told, I was that person that if somebody complimented me, I'd be like, oh, yeah, I would find the reason, like there was an excuse for the fact that I might have looked decent that day. Like you said, oh, I got a new haircut or I have, it's a new outfit or whatever, instead of just saying simply, thank you. I appreciate that. And it took some time, but I got to tell you, after practice, you get pretty good at it. So I like that as a tip. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, of course. It's just these things that come up. It's like when it comes to, again, we said self-awareness and self-compassion. These are
Yeah.
things that are often overlooked in our lives. And
Yes.
that's where the self-sabotage and the coping mechanisms come in, because we're not paying attention to ourselves. And
Hmm.
we're not talking to ourselves as we would our best friends or our
Yes.
partner. And
Yes.
if we treated them that way, if we treated our relationship with them the same way that we treat our relationship with ourselves, it wouldn't last.
That's right.
So I
That's
think that's
right.
a matter of people need to invest more in themselves and have that awareness of how they treat themselves. Because I mean,
Mm,
we only get the one vessel, we only get the one body, and that's
I
supposed to
know.
carry us through life. And how are we treating that? If we treated our bodies the way that we treated everyone else's with the same respect,
Mhm.
imagine how we would be, how we would turn up in the world.
I know. Gosh, I wish I could go back to my 20s and do that all over again because I was pretty brutal on myself. But I mean, we make mistakes. Sometimes we overeat, sometimes we do things that aren't good for us, right? And thankfully, our body can rejuvenate itself for the most part. But there are some things if you do it over a period of time, like unfortunately, I was a cigarette smoker for quite a few years, like 3 decades, which is a long time. And I look back on that span of time that I wasted. And I wasn't a heavy smoker, but nevertheless, it still counted, right? And I'm like, "Oh, man, I wish I wouldn't have done that." But here we are, and it is what it is. And I even said to my husband, I quit many years ago, well, about 15 years ago, and I'm like, "Thank goodness it's been that much time." He goes like, "Babe, it's like your lungs are back to if you were never a smoker." I said, "I hope so." Like, I really do believe that that's true. And I hope that that is true. And I feel like I'm super strong with my capacity and whatnot. But still, we need to be careful because eventually our bad habits do catch up to us, or can anyway.
Yeah, I think it's again, and you kicking the habit as well, it's coming from a place of you knew you could get better, rather than
Yeah.
some people, they're like, well, I've been doing this for so long,
Oh, yeah.
it's not going to make a difference if I stop now. Or if anything, it's like, oh, I know a lot of people and they've been trying to quit smoking for so long, and
Hmm.
they're only in their 20s, early 30s, and they're like, oh, but if I quit now, I know that I'm going to have like a really bad lungs, or I'm going to be coughing everything up for like the next 3 months. And I don't want to do
Oh,
that
that's
going into,
not true.
and they're like, I don't want to do that coming up to Christmas, or I don't want to
Yeah.
do that. My birthday's
No,
next month. I don't want to be like that. And it's like, how long are you going to leave it go until there's always going to be another holiday? There's always going to be another event that you don't want to
that's
look
right.
like you're not at your best at. Or
That's
do you
right.
really think you're showing up at your best with something that is taking so much from you? What is the cost?
Most of my clients that come to me are business owners or executives that are in a high position that drink too much, right? They're in that gray area drinking, and it's a great avenue for them to come to me rather than going a traditional route. They don't need recovery, they need discovery. So that's why they'll come to me. And far too often they'll say to me, "Carrie, I started writing you a message or schedule an appointment with you, and then I backed out." I had my one client right now, who's a year-long client with me. He told me 6 times he went to set out to send me a message and deleted it because he said Christmas was coming up or my son's game was coming up or we were going on vacation and there was always something in the way. And and it's funny because this is our human psychology. This is what we do. Well, I'll just get through that, then I'll deal with it. But that getting to through it and getting to it just keeps the it keeps getting pushed back, pushed back, pushed back instead of just saying, "Okay, I'm ready now." You're always going to have like you said, always a vacation's going to be there, always going to have an event, always a wedding. There's always going to be an excuse to drink or smoke or do something you necessarily shouldn't be doing. And the timing will never be perfect. The timing is now. And that's when, if you've been thinking about it, this is definitely for somebody who's already, you already got those internal voices speaking to you. There's no better time than now. It's not going to get better or easier.
I've always had people who've come with that. Again, the same thing is like, oh, there's always an event coming up, or this is the way I've always been. And they try to justify their coping mechanisms and their self sabotage that how it's serving them. It's like, especially with workaholism, that, oh,
Mhm.
if I don't have this workaholic mentality, I won't
Mhm.
be able to serve my family. I won't be able to maintain this job or maintain this role or work these long hours if I don't use these coping mechanisms. And I'm like, yes, but at what cost? How are you showing up to your work colleagues? How are you making key decisions? How are you showing up to your family outside of work? You're probably a
Yeah.
stress ball most of the time. Are
Stressful.
you really present with them?
Yeah.
And it's when you take those things into account, it's like, are you always like focused on your work emails when you're around your family, when you should be able to switch off and be fully present and enjoy those moments? And a lot of the time people are like, and when that's brought into their awareness, they're like, yes, but now isn't the right time for me to change because I've got a big promotion coming up, or now isn't it the right time for me to change because I have a key decision to be made and I'm on, let's say, a sprint or a fundraising sprint. And rather than focusing on, hang on, if I became aware of what I needed to change and started making increments towards that change,
Mhm.
is there a chance that I could show up better
Yeah.
for my family, for my friends, at work? And it's when that isn't brought into their awareness, and when they have the old habits that they think are serving them or they justify them in some way, it's about trying to help them to see the bigger picture in some way as well. That that starting anytime is the right time to start, but you might as well start now as start
Mhm.
10 years from now. It's like,
Yes.
what is the cost of not starting now versus what is the cost of just taking the time and at least becoming aware. Have it in your awareness, plant that seed and see where it takes you.
Yes. The cost of inaction is quite often way more than just doing the thing now. That is for sure. Yeah, I use an acronym. It's my own model of change, decide model of change, and it's the D. The first D. I'd like to run through it really quick because I think it's applicable for any gray area. It is applicable for every gray area. The first D is having the desire to want to see a difference. Right. The desire is the catalyst for all change. You have to want it, right? But it's not enough. You need more than that. So the E in decide is exploring why. Why is this important to you? Those reasons are often of deep value. They have to be something of deep value. They're the guiding north that's going to get you through. The first time you get knocked off of, your decision to move forward, that why better be strong enough to hold you in there, because you could be tempted. You're going to want to fall back into old patterns. That why has got to be right in front of your face at all times. So exploring your why is huge. And exploring means just that. We're not just willy-nilly and looking for the reason. We want to know deep rooted reasons why. That's why it's exploring your why. The C is having commitment to yourself. You got to be 100% commitment. And commitment, it means investing in yourself. It means time for yourself. It means wanting accountability for yourself. Like commitment has to be 100%, not 98. Because if you allow yourself that little 2% backdoor opening, you're going to take it. I'll give you a quick example on that. Somebody who might want to work with me for drinking might say, well, Kari, I only want to quit for 30 days. And, I want to see if I can go back to moderating drinking. That's leaving a back door open. That's not being 100% committed. Right. So that's a gray area for me when I hear somebody say that's a red flag. Red flags are gray areas, by the way. You can look at it that way too. The I is identity. All about the identity shift. You got to be willing to move into a new identity. How do we do that? Through daily habits. That's the second D. We have to implement new habits. And the last letter, the E, the last D is everyday effort will get us there. Everyday effort leads to an expanded version of ourselves. So we have to be willing to put in that effort. And that's the decide model of change that I take all my clients through. But that's important when we are looking to make significant progress in our life. We have to have those steps.
And if anyone decides to work with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch, Kari?
My website, GrayTonic, by the way, GrayTonic.com. Gray is spelled with an A. I live in the States, right? So the United States, I think, is the only
You
country
should
that
probably
spells
buy
gray with
that
an A.
domain as well with the E, just to be safe.
I do actually own I own GrayTonic with the E.com, but I don't think it's going anywhere. It might. I think if you do plug it in, it might go to my regular site. But anyways, it's GrayTonic.com. That's the best way. You can book a call with me. Or LinkedIn. I'm a big LinkedIn fan. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Kari Schwear. I'm the only Kari Schwear on social. I'm so easy to find.